How many ways can we murder our protagonist? We're going to find out today as we're talking about Tomb Raider on Have You Played? Andrei, Courtney, have you guys played the Tomb Raider franchise?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of it. Like, I played Tomb Raider 3, a smattering of Last Revelation, horrific version of Angel of Darkness, Legend, and then the Anniversary on the Wii, which, by the way, slaps. It is so fun with the Wii remote. I just had to put that one out there. And then I played, obviously, the reboot series all the way through.
So
a couple times, actually, now, I think.
You're the person that I've known in my life who has played the most of any Tomb Raider at all. And that's why we're doing this episode today with Courtney.
Yeah.
Andrei, how much Tomb Raider have you played?
So I played 1, 2, and 3 so long ago, like when I was a teenager, mostly at friends' places. So when we talked about the friends that I played Final Fantasy VIII with, it was the same group. So I never really caught Last Revelation Chronicles, Angel of Darkness, which are the end of the first series. And I completely skipped the second series, which is Legend, Anniversary, and Underworld.
Yeah.
And then I came back for the third series and I played the first two. So I never played the third one in the reboot series, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which I know Courtney has many feelings about. But I do remember spending a lot of time with the 2013 reboot and I mean, having a lot of divergent feelings about it. Some very good, some not so good.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm with you there, although I didn't spend a lot of time with the reboots, which I'll get into. But I did play the OG 1 and 2. I did not play 3. And I don't think I played these in the intended way, but I definitely did play them. And so we're going to talk about our experience with Tomb Raider because it is an important franchise. And, full disclosure, we know it's very important to Courtney. And so we decided to make an episode here to give Courtney some room to sing the praises and whatever the opposite of praises are for Tomb Raider today. So, very briefly, what is this franchise? Well, it started in 1996 with the original Tomb Raider. Published by Eidos Interactive and designed by Core Design, a now-defunct developer that was making the Tomb Raider games up until 2003's Angel of Darkness. Then Crystal Dynamics took over with the Legend, Anniversary, Underworld arc of the Lara Croft saga. And then in 2013, the game and series was rebooted with a new modern take, a new appreciation for violence. And that's kind of where the series has been ever since. So I think the sensible place to start here is in the beginning. And so, Andrei, you played the first Tomb Raider as well?
Yeah,
I
did. I played it after it came out, so I didn't play it in 1996. I'm pretty sure I played it somewhere around 1999. So I played them more like a package deal than like a standalone game. So
I did the same.
They tend to blend together for me. Like the first three are really one game in my brain. Although I know they're not, but that's kind of how they feel.
Yeah, the first two are also one game in my brain.
So, I mean, how do you remember it now, right? Because this is so far away from us. This is what, like 23 years that we played them, 26 years that the games have come out, right? Like a full generation has been born and aged into like voting since this game released.
Yeah, no, and I think that's actually a really good question to remember, like, to what the purpose of this podcast is specifically is like, what's in the memory box from when we played these, right? It's not like a full accounting of how good or bad these games were. This is really like, in my mind, what do I see when I think of Tomb Raider? And For me, I'm gonna be honest. My memory of Tomb Raider 2 was me and my friend Jordan running around her mansion
Yeah.
like it was like a Tony Hawk Pro Skater game and trying to make the most we could make out of hopping around that house. That is Tomb Raider for me. It really is
Right.
because the environments, the actual like narrative and spelunking did nothing. Just
Mm.
absolutely nothing. Just bounced right off my body, guys. But we spent hours and hours just parkouring around her mansion.
That's super interesting because even though I haven't played 1 and 2, like for me, like this is where like so the reason why Tomb Raider is such a cornerstone in like my gaming identity is because it's like the first game that I really just sunk hours and hours and hours into, and it was Tomb Raider 3 because my dad used to play it, and I used to sit and watch him play, and then finally they just downloaded it. They got a PC for me. So when I think of Tomb Raider, I think of my big, chunky, white like PC monitor and desktop and stuff, which also died a motherboard death, which was like tragic for me. Um, but I did the exact same thing. Like I spent hours in Croft Manor just doing the assault course and going around and shutting Winston in the freezer because that's what every child did who played in those games. Just like figuring out how to sprint and do the different puzzles in the house and things like that. Because I was like 7, 8 when I was playing this. I'm trying to think. Tomb Raider 3.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would have been about 8 or 9 maybe, oldest. And like some of the skilled elements of it were really difficult for me, like trying to like sprint to certain ends of the manor and stuff like that. And I'd have to get my dad to help me with certain things, but I didn't really play the rest of it because it was scary too. Like oh gosh, I can't remember what those this is gonna sound. I mean, it's they've aged poorly as well, but like the Kalis, the terrible representations of a Hindu god that you had to fight against.
In a video game? I'm
Yeah,
finding
right.
that hard to
Season three.
believe.
El Surprise. They were so scary for me that like I wouldn't really venture very far in like the jungle level of Tomb Raider 3 because I knew
Yeah.
that they would be coming up. And so but that's like a big part for me was the Tomb Raider mansion. Like the Croft Manor I spent equally the same hours and hours. It was like a glorified dollhouse almost was my thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it also does segue into like how many different ways you could kill Lara Croft in the manor. And
Yeah.
Sims wasn't necessarily on my radar at that point, although I have a feeling it probably would have been out because it's like 2003 the first Sims came out. Now I'm thinking about it. Anyway, but like you could set Lara Croft on fire. You could yeet her from the top of her stairwell. You could like you could shut the door on her and things like that. And that was pretty morbid, but also, morbid play or dark play or whatever it is a very trackable thing going way
Yeah.
back.
I didn't even
You're not
remember
far
you
off.
could kill her in the manor, honestly. That's like, my memory is so different. We were just having a hoot, like swinging from chandeliers or whatever. I don't even know if you could do that. But in my mind, that's what you could do. That's how I remember the game. And I did go back and look at this game, and this game looks fucking terrible. I gotta say.
No.
Well, by our standards, obviously.
I think it looked pretty rough at the time.
So maybe this is where like my childhood eyes can enter the equation.
Yeah,
at, like,
please.
age 10, age 11. So I distinctly remember like so I was over at my friend Christopher's place and his big brother was playing these games, and so we didn't really get a chance to play that much. We often just watched. And so I remembered I got to see a lot of the first game, especially like the Egypt and Greece areas. And the third one, some of the sort of Polynesian inside of the temples. And like, basically, it just looked like third-person GoldenEye to me, where like I was also playing GoldenEye at the time. And so everything just
Yeah.
looked like nondescript temple interior that is like, it's like yellowish tan if you're in Egypt.
Yep.
It's ivory if you're in Greece, and it's sort of like earth, like more earthy tones if you're in Polynesia. That's it. That and like the rat-a-tat of the guns that was like
Yeah.
really perpetual when you had any kind of combat. but I think it's too far back in the past for me to like remember any with great detail a formative memory of this game.
Yeah.
And it sort of just lived as like an idea, and maybe there's like a secondary branching point to talk about the series, which is how big the Lara Croft Tomb Raider movie was in relation to this. Like, I feel like the movie is actually much more of a predominant contact point for me and other people my age that I know than the original series of games is.
Well,
So it tends to go like,
I don't know how true that is. I mean, it is okay. The movie part is huge, but like, if you think of Lara Croft and Tomb Raider in the context of like Next Gen magazine at this time, like this was
right.
Like gamers looked forward to this game series because it was, to some degree, especially with the outdoor environments, pushing the boundaries of what you could do. Now, the manor, I still think looks like shit, but, the way they did walls, the way they did traversal was really impressive at the time. If not in execution, then certainly conceptually for what the future of games would look like, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really
right.
pushed the idea of like this 3D platformer with like the slope, especially like the sloping elements as well, like where you slide and you have to flip off and like do certain like jumps. Like the fact that she had that like forward, back, left, right, like jump mechanic, like on a, it wasn't, I don't know what the term is, like it was like a north, south, east, west jumping movement. It didn't, you couldn't really jump like on a diagonal necessarily until like, unless you were like moving forward or whatever. Which when I went to try and go play it back when I was in undergrad, because I was like, oh man, nostalgia, I want to go back and play Tomb Raider 3, and I was like, I cannot play this game anymore. The controls are so not mapped into my brain whatsoever, and they are not intuitive whatsoever. And I think that's but it really, I think that's a big thing, like reading about it, especially like for the PlayStation and stuff. It really pushed the parameters of what folks could do technically in those game spaces, which is why I think also was so revered.
And then before we get into the movie, that also lines up with like Lara Croft was a pixelated sex symbol even before the films, right? Like,
right. Well, I think the casting in the movie is largely on the basis of the perception of the character in virtually every magazine ever.
Yeah.
And to that point, like the sort of the importance of the Lara Croft like icon in gaming culture. I don't know if either of you remember this, but I want to say around 5 or 6 years ago, when GameStop got called out for generally having very sexist hiring and promoting practices in the company.
In video games?
Yeah.
They actually got called out for that?
Yeah, well, from a lot of, I think, employees. And I mean, they were voted worst employer in the United States, I think 3 or 4 years running, beating out amazing employers like Walmart or I don't want to get this podcast demonetized.
It's already demonetized.
But the response wasn't to hire or promote people in the company to positions of authority. It was to create a sort of like VP gender and social issues position, and they just put Lara Croft Tomb Raider as the icon on their website. Not like an actor playing that character, just the character from the games, from the 2013 game, actually.
Effing yikes.
Really bad.
But it is actually so many layers of no.
But should still like be an indicator to us of the enduring importance of the character as sort of this icon of, I don't know what you want to call it, like 1990s like strong femininity. It's
the girl power thing, right? The girl power TM, like the Spice Girls, the the 90s sort of sex symbol mystique, I guess, of what that is. And I think that's what Lara Croft was that in the gaming digital spaces, and like was she was like the face of advertising for a couple different brands. I can't remember what now, but it was like I'm sure it was like for a soda company at one point. Um, and like there's also like there was a I remember vividly like an advert where like she like takes off her towel and stuff, and then she turns to the camera and she's like, no, like, it's time for you to leave. I can't remember what the context is. And like the door shuts. So like there's a lot of like paratext as well around her as being this like digital sex symbol.
Did this
And like
work
there's
for
all the
you?
mystique. For me, as her as a sex symbol,
Not as a
no.
sex symbol, but because she's not just a sex symbol, right? She's at this cross section of girl power / sex symbol,
Yeah,
and like for me, I thought she was cool. I didn't care about a sexy lady in the game. Like
no.
it's not my. But I'm
Yeah, and this
curious
is
for you, like what?
yeah, and this is something that I always like getting into conversations about because I've never saw her as like quote sexy. Do you know? Like, I mean, in reflection now, like as an adult, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I can see that because, as much as the triangle boobs get made fun of, like they were like significantly sized, she was tiny. She wore a crop top and hot pants or whatever, but for me it was just like she was just a really cool kick-ass heroine. Like that's how I viewed her. Um and like again, like representation of women in games has a lot still of journeys to take, and there is like this critique of like the macho heroine, which is like where Lara Croft and like the other person is like Ciri in Witcher 3 like takes up this space where they're like badass, cool, but sexy still, etc., etc. But yeah, for me, like for Lara Croft, it was never that. It was, and the girl power thing, like I don't know, I wish I could go back and ask 7 to 9 year old me, like, what do you think about girl power? Because I think I'd be like, yeah, let's go. But now I'm like, it, bit of a construct, but whatever. Um, I liked her because, she was cool. She could do wicked flips and had guns, and it was a girl I could play in a game, which there really wasn't that much around that was available to me that wasn't, Barbie games, horse games, dress
Yeah.
up games. It was
Yeah.
like, oh, I get to occupy this like cool guys don't look at explosion space.
Yeah.
And she was sassy and witty, and I didn't come, I don't play for game, I play for sport or whatever it is like her key line that she says in like I think it's number 2 or number 3. Like she was cool. That's what I really liked about her. She was cool, calm, and collected, but also to put a pretty big, stopper on it is she was also like an upper class white British lady, and I'm not upper class by any stretch of the imagination, but like I can see a lot of myself represented in her because of that, which
Right.
probably meant I resonated with her a lot more also.
Yeah, I mean, don't me and my buddy both aspired to have that mansion too. So like that
Oh,
worked
dude,
for
yeah.
random Canadian dudes.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
I think for me it's the archaeology part, which to the surprise of no one who knows me has actually like fully contaminated every aspect of my life. But
Mhm.
it's interesting. Like the valence of the character is really mixed up, and um one of the really early pieces about this was an article, I think from Jeremy Parrish from One Up at the time, which is this gaming website that's been long defunct. And Parrish kind of talked about this sort of mix of like, on the one hand, hypersexualized sex appeal that IDOS was like really exploiting to sell games. On the other hand, in the context of female characters at the time in video games, there really wasn't much that was like that. Like now, Lara Croft doesn't seem necessarily as unique in terms of like strong girl power sort of representation. At the time where you're clocking, Courtney, with all of the like the Barbie games and all the stuff
Yeah,
that Brenda Laurel's written about, and
100%.
Princess Peach and all of this stuff, like it's just a completely different kind of representation that you maybe got a bit of in like Mortal Kombat, I think. And I can't really think of another franchise from that period that is like Metroid until
then
like
Yeah. And then here is my, like, I guess the segue that I would offer, which is comparatively between OG and then like that kind of middle transition period where like next gen, sort of the Wii and the PS3 kind of were kicking about, to where we are now with like the rebooted Lara Croft. Like I have a lot of like, and this is why we're doing this podcast episode as well, because I have a lot of like tensions between like the OG Lara that I grew up with versus the reboot Lara, which like for me is like, well, there's going to be girls who were my age probably seeing their like parents or, you know, siblings playing that, and like this will be their introduction into gaming, and like so I have like that context in my brain, but also like it feels like they kind of, in trying to make her more quote realistic, which let's be real, she's still a petite white British lady from upper class society and is like very athletic built. Like it's not like they really like, it's not like she's not sexy all of a sudden because she doesn't have big tits or anything like that, to be just blunt, sorry. But like my biggest gripe, which is such an odd one, is right at the end of the first game. And this is the thing, I was playing through the original reboot to try and get to this point. I had to watch the scene in the end because I didn't make it. Is that she kills the final boss. Spoilers if you haven't played it. I mean, it's been out nearly 10 years now, which is shocking in itself. But anyway, like it's been out for 10 years, not people haven't played it. She kills the final boss with the dual pistols, which she gets from this like father figure mentor at his demise when he saves her so that she can go on, etc., etc. And then they never come back. And it was the most frustrating thing for someone who had played the original games, where those dual pistols are like iconic to her in the films. They're iconic to her. And then they're like, yes, climactic moment, she has the dual pistols. And then I was like, hype, awesome. So we're going to see kind of this like kick-ass Lara version in the next game, which was Rise of the Tomb Raider. And then it was back to the bow and arrow and the pickaxe, like the climbing axe again. And I was like, this doesn't fit a narrative at all. Like in terms of like, you know, she gets the stuff and then they're like, oh, she decided just to not bring those. I'm like, no, but like that's such an iconic element of it. And I actually like looked up online like people's discussions. They were like, well, they're trying to like separate OG Lara between reboot Lara and stuff like that. I'm like, then they shouldn't have had the dual pistols, because it just felt like fan service and cheap fan service at that in the end, because it's such an iconic like element of who, like what I remember from playing Lara Croft. And sure, like they have unlimited ammunition and you can remedy that, but she still has a single pistol in all of the games. So I'm like, why? So this is one of my really weird, like, semiotic gripes, I guess, with the series.
It ain't weird.
Well, you know what I mean? Like, it's a really, but it felt like such an odd decision to make, to have that, like, climactic, oh, she's Lara Croft now, and then to go, but not really. And when I was reading about it, Dan Bissell, I think is the name of the game director, was like, well, we're not going to put her in a bikini and, like, hot pants and give her the dual pistols. I'm like, the dual pistols are not mutually exclusive with the bikini, sir. Like, you can have someone dressed in an aviator, you know, sick looking outfit and still have the dual pistols. In fact, that happened in multiple of the games where she was fully clothed and still had them and she was still kick ass. Like, it's the most like, what? Have you studied the source material, sir, kind of element of it? And I'm like, I mean, I'm gonna sound like a hashtag gamer now, but do you know what I mean? Like, I was so frustrating as a fan of the series to be like, don't put it in there if you're not actually going to commit, because it's not fan service. Like, this isn't fan service. It's just like a fan tease, and then that's it.
So I have a theory about this, if I may.
You may.
Of course.
So I think one of the really interesting things is folks like me who didn't play the second trilogy of Tomb Raider games that were on PS2 and PS3, I think,
And the Wii.
didn't stop playing sort of these let's call them like treasure hunter games, right? And there is another franchise which emerged in this like intermission period between the older franchises of Tomb Raider and the reboot of Tomb Raider, which I think is part of the conversation, even though it's not part of the conversation. And that's Uncharted.
Yeah. 100%.
And I think Uncharted as a franchise leaned much more into sort of like, what if Indiana Jones but 21st century, uses guns, much more like wisecracking, and sort of it kind of cannibalized a lot of what made Tomb Raider popular in terms of like those action elements, which are very prominent in the trilogy of movies as well. Like that's kind of the, you know, if we want to like differentiate with the movie trilogies, it's like the Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider is kind of like that style of Tomb Raider, and then you get like your sort of modern Indiana Jones. And so to differentiate from both franchises, New Lara, which is sort of there's a new movie in 2018 that I think 2018 I think
Yep.
the Alicia Vikander movie, which is like much more svelte, much more of a survivalist, sort of a reluctant hero, really only uses like items that are foraged, and is actively not trying to do like, it's sort of positioned as kind of like antithetical to what the premise of the original Lara Croft was, which is like she doesn't want to go in these tombs most of the time. She's like dragged into the action by the villain and is like divorced from that sort of colonialist part of Indiana Jones as well.
I
So I think, like-
wouldn't necessarily agree, because a lot of the premises of the places that she goes, like even like the first game of the reboot, is her like they're searching for this lost island of Yamatai, right? Like
Right.
there is an element, there's still this like tomb diving, and I mean there's a really cliche line that she does say, she's like, I hate tombs, and it's like blah, like that's such like I was really disappointed with that line. Like this is the thing, I find some of the writing is good, some of the writing is really bad, like a very like
Right.
we need the soundbite for the trailer element of it. So to that point, I would say that there's still that element. I mean, there was that Waypoint Vice article that came out about the one, the Shadow of the Tomb Raider, for the Peru, Mexico land space that I can't remember the entirety of it, because it's been ages actually since I played that one, ironically. So just to that point, I just want to say, like, I wouldn't necessarily say she's divorced from it.
No, so I should retool my statement to be a bit more like more pointed with it. I don't think the games are that. I think that's what the developers wanted the games to be, and why they feel weirdly different from those other franchises. Not that they succeed, and in fact I think they get like progressively worse as the new trilogy advances. And yeah,
I mean, here's the kicker. If I remember correctly, like the end of the third game in that trilogy, in the Shadow of the Tomb Raider, you have like this end sequence where she's planning where she's going next. I can't remember the plot line for the life of me now, but I'm pretty sure her next location is somewhere in Syria, which I'm just like unsure where that's going to go.
If it even
and why
continues.
they would pick, right? Like why they would, one, why they pick that location, just in general. But two, it's just like, so it's like the tease of like the next location they're going to, and like, you know, one of the big complaints I've heard about this whole trilogy is it's like, oh, it's Lara Croft becoming her own, like she's coming into her own. It's like she came into her own for 3 games, guys. Like you had the crap beaten out of her in the first game. Like I forgot how many brutal sequences there are. Like it is, I think like the joke that ended up going around was it's literally falling down simulator at points where you're just anything you touch disintegrates beneath you and you fall, and you have quick time events, and then you step on something else and then you fall. And I forgot how much that happens. Sorry?
It's got that peak like quick time event.
Yeah.
Like we were starting to get divorced from it, but we weren't fully there yet.
No, they dragged it back and just really committed to it. And also like in any of those sequences, like there is a brutal, horrific way to die. Like, you know, there's getting impaled on the rapids on some kind of like shrapnel. There's, you know, falling to your death. There's like, you know, you're just set on fire.
This is my, other than the manor, this is my second memory of the Tomb Raider franchise, is all the ways that she can be horrifically murdered in that game. And like, honestly, I didn't really gel with any iteration of this franchise for like these kinds of reasons. But this franchise is enormous. Like it's clearly doing something right and again, maybe part of that is the legacy of the movie that we kind
Yeah.
of glossed over, but I don't think so. Like, there's something about these games that does work for a great many folks. What
Yeah,
is
I
it
mean,
though?
it's the thing. I will if there's a next trilogy coming out, I'll play them. I think partly because I'm just kind of like in the franchise now and I'll play it no matter what. But this is actually a really good point with the whole like the authenticity to the originals, which is like these horrible ways to die. Like it's odd to me, and I remember there being a developer interview when they talked about like we wanted to keep that like horrible sequences of deaths in because like it's integral to the like the Tomb Raider way, because like a lot of people do talk about all the horrible ways you could die as Lara Croft in like the original series, and it's like, again, without harking on it, why take that bit and then not do the dual pistols? Like, why is that the through line that you want to carry through even into 2 and 3 of the reboot as well? It's the same thing. Like, you can get shredded by a machine gun, if I remember correctly, at points.
Well, even in the first game of the new trilogy, right? Like there are many deaths where you're like, you're going down the river and you hit like a pike or something,
Yeah.
or like the plane shrapnel falls on you. Those, like, they're brutal, and I think that the game has sort of this sort of grim, Dark Soulsy sort of DNA that is in the game that I think was also like a lot of companies were trying to come to grips with, that the fact that those games were in a lot of ways the core of the sort of new wave of gaming culture.
Yeah, like that aesthetic was particularly popular at the time for sure.
Right, but the one that like really gets me from the 2013 game is the one that is played as like a jump scare, where you're like trying to get to shelter in a camp in like a cave, and there's like a homeless man who is like enraged and assaults you, and it felt like very like gratuitously brutal and very voyeuristic. Like the pleasure of the game is located there more than it is about the guns, which like I think should tell us something about the fact that like they cut out some of the female empowerment elements from the original franchise because they deemed those unrealistic, but they kept all of the abject brutality visited on women as like part of the pleasure that audiences were going to derive from the play experience.
And I think maybe that's, that kind of encapsulates why it rubs me wrong, because it is that thing of like, I feel like there was a loss of the parts that I felt were integral to her, but like a remaining overhang of like you said, like that abject horror pleasure element, it does, and I think that's kind of what has carried over that I don't super vibe with in the new series.
An interesting discussion to have parallel to this, which like this episode I don't think can contain that discussion, but is like, what is the parallel between that aspect of enjoyment for Tomb Raider and similar discussions that we've been having in film studies over the last 30 years about like final girls and slasher movies, and like slasher movies being about like the pleasure in watching people who've transgressed be punished, and to have these like final girls then visit vengeance on the perpetrators. Like the antagonist in the 2013 game is sort of like a horror movie villain. He's like a cult leader who is also like hunting down innocent. Like the first game is effectively like a slasher movie inside of a Tomb Raider shell. Yeah, and I think that's why like I'm thinking about them together, except that I don't. Like though 1980s horror films were very transgressive for the era, and they were fighting back against a lot of other puritanical notions, and I don't think these games are.
No, I think
conversely, sorry to jump in, but conversely, the second game in the new trilogy, you essentially meet Jesus, which I just completely forgot as an element of this, which is like it's the what's you call it? It's the Byzantine like immortal guy, and it's just the most oddly Christian undertones to the whole thing. Which has just suddenly hit me in the brain as like a complete shift. And then you go full Predator in the third game. And it's like, what is what what is our trajectory here, guys? Like,
Right.
like I just what's happening? Like, what's going on? So sorry to jump in with that, but like this is the thing. Like, if the first game is the horror film contained on an island, the second game is basically Indiana Jones. Like, this belongs in a museum, but with like some really super Christian undertones to the whole thing. And then the third game is, Predator Lara Croft, who comes out of the mud and you rub mud on her to be stealthy, and then you murder
Yeah.
in the silence of the night. And I'm just like, where are we going with this, guys? Because it feels like we've got 3 different Laras that we've played, and there's not a consistency.
Well, maybe they
Yet.
don't know is the answer.
And this is another, I guess, overarching question, because I know you guys are going to continue to talk about games that you've played that are going to inevitably be reboots of well-known franchises or new installations in a franchise. Like, there is this constant struggle when studios try to produce more on a franchise or nostalgia bait on a franchise, and they end up with these issues and with gamers complaining and players complaining, or like loving different elements of it. And I think that's such a consistent like through line now in a lot of the games we see, for the context in which they're happening, because it's so hard to port what was present in the 90s and noughties version into the 2010s, 2020s, because it's just a completely different cultural context as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Well, I think one of the discussions that Mark and I and you have had over the last few weeks is the extent to which God of War is part
Yeah.
of this phenomenon of let's take a really beloved but problematic franchise and let's mash it together with Hollywood blockbuster films of different genres to produce an object of artistic legitimacy in the game sphere, right? And so God of War gets one genre, Tomb Raider gets these genres that we're talking about now.
Yeah.
But it was celebrated as wow, it's almost like a movie. Look at how much of a breakthrough it is. Look at the graphics. Look at the mocap. It's so realistic. And
the hair
all this
physics.
Stuff, right?
That was one of the big
the
things
rain
around
physics.
the 2013.
And this is the thing.
It's the hair.
Yeah, and this is the yes, right, I forgot, and I did try turning it on and it cooked my laptop, even the 2013 version. And then I think that this is then the difference between looking at two long-standing franchises with an eponymous character is with God of War, even though they obviously rebooted it or whatever, they picked a lane with Kratos. I still haven't finished it yet. But they picked a lane with him and they've committed to that lane. Even in God of War and God of War Ragnarok, there is a consistency in that. I mean, admittedly, it can come off as fairly two-dimensional because he is, I am dad of war. It's better than that. I'm being very reductive over it. I think that they've written him incredibly well versus Lara, which I'm saying, I think you get 3 different versions of her in these 3 different games. And I think that's where nostalgia bait reboots can really fail their fan base, is if they are not consistent in what they are trying to do with the character. Because if you're just she's coming into her own, which is the repetitive motif that they use, it's you can only do that so long before it's no, you just don't know what she's going to be. And you don't have a pulse on what is going to be the most appropriate, I guess.
Right.
But I'll still play the future games when they come out and have lots to say about them. Because it's what got me into games. That's the bottom line of this. I have a lot of passion and critique about this series because it means so much to me. I think that's really why. I could talk for another 45 minutes about it, but
no,
I can't.
But I think the way you're feeling is it's a feeling I've heard repeated a lot by women I grew up with who had a similar take on the franchise. And that's sort of been updated with the 2013 series as sort of being not only is Lara Croft an important game character, Lara Croft is this is a character of art, of important stories, of technological development. There's a whole conflagration of discourses, artistic, technological, game, film, emancipatory, like whatever you want to mix in here, that I think a lot of people derive from this franchise, which is why it has, persistent popularity, even though there are critiques to have of it. Like the white interloper savior like critique is completely legitimate, and I think despite that, it speaks to a lot of resonant ideas that people have about treasure hunting and archaeology and all this stuff.
I propose a segment, which is, if anyone else could or should remake Tomb Raider, who could? And we said they've kind of already done this with Uncharted, but like if you had to give this game to another company, another developer, imbue it with the properties of another franchise, is there some configuration that you see handling what you believe the essence of Lara Croft, what the essence of this tomb raiding journey is for you? Is there another company, another developer?
That's a really good question.
That produces the game that you want, or an experience that's just different in some way. I float this to either of you.
But I mean, I have a sense. My main problem is that no studio I can think of will solve the white interloper problem of the franchise, and that's what I would want to solve the most. So aside from that, I think like this kind of game also needs like a very large budget to either be photorealistic or have like very large locales. And I'm like, Naughty Dog made Uncharted, so it wouldn't be them. Sony Santa Monica, I wouldn't want like a God of War treatment on this, and I wouldn't want like a Bethesda treatment. A company that I think would be an interesting take on this, although their track record with cultural sensitivity is not impeccable, it would be Guerrilla from the Netherlands, the people who made
Horizon Zero Dawn.
Horizon. I would want their flourish on the way that a Lara Croft game would look. And I know that would sort of transform it more into something like Horizon or Assassin's Creed. But I think if the premise of a Tomb Raider game is that you get to go to a place and be there, I would want more of that place to walk around in. And hopefully they would include whatever locale they're going to, get cultural experts, get scholars, get people who know about that place to come on and to help you make a quality product that is interesting for international audiences and also respectful to the people who are there. Like from day one, not like 3/4 of the way through the project, you're like, we need a consultant. Do it first.
Yeah, that's the thing that there's a big like flag now for a lot of folks is like, if you want a consultant, bring them on from the start. Do not ask them to fix and backtrack all of your mistakes. Because that's also just a huge amount of emotional labor to put onto someone to be like, you also have to go through all of our problematic stuff. Sorry. I think now I was thinking about the studio. Now I have not played Cyberpunk 2077. I think I would be curious what CD Projekt Red would do with the Lara Croft IP.
Known for their cultural sensitivity.
Known for their cultural sensitivity.
Excellent gender politics.
Right? Because I feel like if they were given this, I'm it's more of a I wouldn't want them to. I'm more like, as a thought experiment, I would be curious to see what would come out of that. The one that I actually genuinely would be super interested in, although like they make not like Lara Croft type games necessarily, is I'm gonna forget who made it. The Hades.
Oh, Supergiant?
Supergiant games.
Yeah.
Because
interesting.
I thoroughly enjoyed their writing.
Yeah, their writing's great. I think Supergiant needs to be off the list of possible studios to get a game. Just give them everything. Like,
yeah, no, I thoroughly look forward to whatever the next IP is, because I can still go back to Hades and there is still stuff for me to do, and it does not feel like a slog. It feels so freaking satisfying every time I get like 3 pieces of dialogue. But we won't go into Hades now because we're talking about Tomb Raider.
That's another episode.
Yeah, it is.
Mark, do you have a contender?
Do I have a contender for this? I don't think so. Here's what I think that I would like. Put some women in charge of the teams making these games, and I think you might get closer to much in the way that with God of War, lead designer was a dad, wrote a dad story, and it works. Let's have some people write their stories into these games,
But
and I
Rihanna
think.
Pratchett was the writer.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's why I was so confused, like, because you're totally right, but I wonder if it's not a writing problem, if it's we're just gonna mesh the environment with the writing, and that's where the collision happened.
Oh, I mean like design lead. Like I
Yeah,
don't know who
yeah.
is the
No,
design
that's
leads of whose vision is
So-
this, right? Because
It
for
doesn't-
God of
yeah.
War, it is the Andre. His name I do not remember.
Cory Barlog.
Barlog. That's right.
Yeah. So
it's his
for-
whole.
for-
It's the whole package, right? You're directing. You're guiding the whole ship, and it can't just be the writing. It has to be. You're overseeing every facet of this because in a game, every mechanic, every environment, every aspect of the game is conveying something to you as you play it, right? It can't just be in the writing. It has to be everywhere. And I'm not
Yes.
saying people didn't try, but like let's put some folks in the position to steer the whole ship and see what we actually get.
Yeah. So in terms of the original game, like the 2013 one, it's a mix, right? So the writers for 2013, and I mean we should just probably list them out because that'll give people an idea real quick. So writers, Rihanna Pratchett, Susan O'Connor, and John Stafford, but there are 3 directors who are not the writers: Noah Hughes, Daniel Chater, and Daniel Newberger. And I'm pretty sure Noah Hughes and Daniel Newberger stayed on for Rise, but the writers changed. It was only Rihanna Pratchett for Rise, and then for the third one, it's not Rihanna Pratchett anymore who's writing. It's Jason Duzois, I think is the name. I hope I'm not massacring their name. And Joel Murray, and a completely different director, Daniel Chayer. So these games, I think, more than, for example, sort of this emergent style of auteur blockbuster game like God of War and The Last of Us, which we can clearly, locate in Barlog and like Druckmann's vision. These are team games. They're made by multiple people,
Yeah.
and I you're right that the writers, they can do the best work possible. But if they write a great script and at the end it goes down to vision design and the person at that table is like, cut it, it doesn't like fit in with this gameplay loop or how much time we have to like polish, you can only do so much, right? Same thing as like a movie where like the script can be fantastic, but if you get a good director, like a bad director or vice versa, the product ends up somewhere in the middle.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
you can't.
Totally. And I just want to say too, like, I appreciate all the hard work you all did on this game, director, writers, everyone. But I think we can move forward from this, right? Like,
Right.
there's maybe a better way to configure the way we're making these things to tell a different story in a better way. But that said, these games are beloved. They are good.
I think we're all also sort of on the team of a lot in these games is good. Like the combat, the exploring, the traversal, the sort of thriller / horror movie tension around like nature shifting around you in like potentially dangerous ways. All that stuff lands right. And you really just need like that extra step of like polishing the cultural content, making it less problematic, refiguring out like what you are selling to the audience in terms of like the valence of the character. And I'm hopeful. Like I didn't end with this series in like a wow, I hope they never pick this back up again. So,
yeah, no.
Which is a feeling I have with other franchises for sure.
Yeah. No, I do hope that they pick up Tomb Raider and continue it and like, look at what they've done so far and tried. I mean, again, the first game in the reboot came out in 2013, which is now nearly 10 years ago. So there's a lot of growth in terms of narrative in games, I think, that could hopefully, and like there's enough amazing examples out there that has really flourished, like the power of good screenwriting in games, that I hope it gets picked up and carried into like a golden era, let's say, of Tomb Raider, and that they bring back the dual pistols.
So I have some news on that front. If the two of you are willing to
do it, we'll do some news and then we'll close it.
Perfect.
So there is indeed a next installment of the Tomb Raider franchise on the way.
Ooh.
Unfortunately,
It's an arcade game, isn't it?
It's not even a game. It's a anime based on what the fourth installment's treatment would be, made by Netflix and Legendary Entertainment. So it will be an animated series that we get at some point in the future. This was announced as an acquisition. Nope. This was announced as an acquisition by Netflix, I think in fall of 2021.
I wish you could see my face right now, because it is one of pure confusion.
Are you just waiting with anticipation on this?
Listen, Dota Dragon's Blood was good.
Did you finish it?
I did.
Oh, you did. You went all the way.
That's neither here nor there.
No.
I would love to peel back the curtain and understand like why this. I presume it's because the animated version will cost significantly less to make than the game will.
Well, and then they can also gauge whether it's worth making a game based off of any kind of reception on it.
Yeah.
As the cynic.
Oh, there's so many reasons why that could be the case, but
yeah.
Right.
Well, I guess that's what we're gonna see of Lara Croft in a game for a little bit.
Yeah.
Cool.
You know, and on that note, much like the shaky history and relationship we all have to this franchise, we leave you with a shaky ending. So for Courtney, for myself, and for Andre, goodbye. We'll see you next time on Happy Played.
Bye.
Bye.